Today we are going to talk about a historical event that happened in 2011. This event is called the 2011 Super Outbreak. Was a devastating outbreak. There were about 362 tornadoes that were recorded in the USA. Now, this outbreak lasted from April 25 to April 28, and it was no joke. It had an impact on the world. It was one of the largest, deadliest outbreaks in U.S. history. The 2011 super outbreak impacted 21 states. You can just imagine how many states were affected. 21 is a big number. When it comes to states, there are 50 states, and 21 were affected. It is almost half of the entire USA, which makes this even more devastating. The devastation was heavily concentrated in the southeastern United States. So anyone living there at that time, I feel real bad for you. That must have been such a traumatic moment. How it started. 2011 super outbreak began on April 25, 2011 in the states of Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, triggered by a powerful low-pressure system moving out of the southern plains. Now that is wild. I can only imagine how scary it must have been. I was alive in 2011, but I was around 1 to 2 years old and honestly not conscious enough to understand what was going on in that year. But looking back, that was terrifying, and I'm glad it never went to California. That's what the sheet I am reading off of said. Remember, I am getting this information from Google, so please take it with a grain of salt. Now let's talk about how it started. The outbreak kicked off when a violent, mild-latitude cyclone moved eastward from Rocky Mountains. As it hit the plains, it pulled dry desert air from the west and slammed into hot, moisture-rich air flowing north of the Gulf of Mexico. This created a highly unstable atmosphere, and by afternoon of April 25, the first severe supercell thunderstorm rapidly erupted along a collision zone. The impact on the first affected states. Arkansas, the largest hit state during opening 24 hours of the outbreak. So just in 24 hours. On the evening of April 25, a long-track EF2 tornado tore through the town of Vilonia. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm so sorry. Now, if you do not know what an EF2 tornado is, I'll explain. These codes represents the enhanced Fujita, or EF scale, which meteorologists use to rate a tornado's intensity based on the wind speed and severity of the structural damage it caused. EF0 is weak and light damage. The wind speed is 65 to 85 miles per hour. Typically peels off roofs, breaks tree branches, and pushes over shadowed trees and damages signboards. And EF1, moderate damage. Wind speeds up to 86 to 110 miles per hour. Strips off roofs, singes, overturning mobile homes, moving cars off roads, and snapping tree trunks. And this isn't even the worst. You can already imagine how scary the bigger ones will be. EF2, significant, considerable damage. Wind speeds up to 111 to 135 miles per hour, tearing roofs completely off, demolishing homes, snapping large trees, and lifting cars off the ground. One was what the city of Vilona was experiencing. 4 people. And this is EF2. And entire subdivisions and heavily damaged the local high school. Widespread flash floods across the state also washed out roads and forced hundreds of residents to evacuate. Hundreds. Let that sink in. 3. Severe damage. Wind speeds are up to 136 to 165 miles per hour. It destroys entire stories of well-built houses, derailing trains and lifting heavy vehicles off of the ground. Heavy vehicles. Let this information sink in on how devastating this event was. EF4, devastating damage. The wind speeds are 166 to 200 miles per hour. Now, we are starting to get higher than 100, which now we're at 200. Well-constructed frame houses completely reduces structure to piles of derbies and turns cars into airborne missiles. Is incredible damage, exceeding over 200 miles per hour, lifting strong frame houses off foundations and carrying them to considerable distances, disintegrates concrete, and completely strips asphalt from the roads. We are looking at terrifying abilities of tornadoes. And I thought EF2 was bad, but it looks like they were worse. It experienced the first tornadoes of the outbreak during mid-afternoon of April 25. The storm system dropped several brief but intense EF0 and EF1 tornadoes in the northeast Texas, causing localized damage to roofs, snapping power lines, and uprooting trees around the Red River Valley. And just being there, I feel very bad for whoever had to experience this. Oklahoma, struck by fast-moving lines of severe storms and proceeded localized tornadoes, including an EF1 that hit near the town of Muse. The primary impact here was exceptionally large hail, some the size of baseballs, and intense straight lines winds that tore through roofs of barns, knocking the power out for thousands. Not hundreds anymore. We're in the thousands. Missouri. It was battered by a mix of weak tornadoes and catastrophic torrent rainfalls. The initial waves of the storm triggered severe flash floods that swelled rivers, submerging low-lying communities and washing away rural infrastructure, setting the stage for even worse flooding later that week. It was April 25. Since this lasted from April 25 to 28, we must cover all those days. So now, we're talking about April 26, 2011. The outbreak entered its second day, acting as a bridge that shifted the destruction from the Central Plains into the deep South and Midwest. The storm system expanded rapidly, dropping over 50 confirmed tornadoes across the massive geographic area. So, there was over 50 confirmed tornadoes that occurred. Do you know how much that is? But these tornadoes are even more ruthless than the last. The most dangerous tornado from the last entry was an EF2, but in Texas, late night to early morning, the storm system re-intensified overnight. So let it sink in. Let all this information sink in. Dropping a large, rain-obscured EF3 tornado. Remember how dangerous I said EF3 tornadoes were? Now they're here. And this is only day 2. In East Texas, near the town of Texarkana. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This massive tornado destroyed homes, flattened commercial buildings, and caused multiple injuries right along the Arkansas border. Arkansas faced its second consecutive day of devastation. The state was battered by multiple EF2 tornadoes that ripped through rural communities, causing extensive grid damage that flattened poultry farms and worsened the historic flash flooding that was already underway. As you see, we are dealing with flash floods and tornadoes, which is a bad combo, a really dangerous combo. Louisiana suffered severe structural impacts when multiple intense tornadoes touched down in the northern part of the state. An EF2 tornado heavily damaged parts of Natchitoches Parson, tearing roofs off homes and snapping thousands of trees. That is a lot of damage that has occurred. Michigan and Wisconsin experienced an unusually strong early season northern push from the storm system. An intense EF2 tornado tore a 13-mile path through the Marathon Country, Wisconsin. 13-mile path torn by an EF2 tornado. And an EF2 tornado isn't even the strongest, but it could deal that much damage. It flattened barns and cut power to thousands, while Michigan faced weaker EF0 and EF1 tornadoes that caused localized damage. Kentucky and Indiana battled a long line of supercells that brought a mix of weak tornadoes, massive hail, and torrential rainfall. The intense storms forced levels to rise rapidly, prompting widespread evacuations and road closures. April 26 did not see massive death tolls the following day, but it was meteorology critical. The storm this day pulled larger, interrupted the corridor of volatile Gulf moisture northwards, set up extreme atmospheric instability that triggered catastrophic historical destruction all across Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Just hours later, let's talk about April 27, 2011. the outbreak reached its catastrophic peak, becoming the deadliest and most destructive single tornado to date in the United States since 1925. It went ruthless. And over the course of 24 hours, 219 tornadoes touched down across the South, killing 324 people, causing billions of dollars in damage. The disaster unfolded in 3 distinctive waves and storms that gave residents little to no time to recover. They had no time. Wave 1. The fastest moving line of a severe thunderstorm swept across Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee while most residents were asleep. They have no time to act. This wave produces dozens of EF1 and EF2 tornadoes. It knocked out power grids, snapped trees, destroyed emergency sirens. This effective blinded and publicly disabled warning systems right before the main storm arrived. 2. At 11 a.m., after a brief lull, a second localized wave of intense thunderstorms fired up northern Alabama and southern Tennessee. The damage was a wave dropping several powerful tornadoes, including an EF3 tornado that severely damaged Cullman, Alabama. It further compromised the region's infrastructure, leaving emergency personnel overwhelmed before the worst part hit. Wave 3, 3 p.m. The atmosphere reached peak instability at late afternoon, triggering a massive outbreak along track violent supercells. This wave produced all 4 EF5 tornadoes, and some of them were EF4s. The biggest one we were talking about so far was EF3, but now we've jumped to 5. Hackleberg Phil Camper, EF5, the deadliest tornado of the whole day, cut a 132-mile path across northern Alabama to Tennessee, obliterating entire towns, costing billions in repairs, tossing vehicles out of their yards, and killing 72 people. It struck Mississippi with incredible violence, completely disintegrating well-built brick homes and causing damage. A massive, mile-long tornado that tore directly to the heart of 2 at the northern suburbs of Birmingham was captured live on television, leveled entire commercial zones, and killed 64 people. EF5 of Rainsville plowed through northern East Alabama, ripping pavement across the roads and lifting massive 25-ton concrete building off of its foundation. 25-ton concrete building ripped off of its very foundation. Let that sink in. Just let this whole thing sink in. At the end of the night, emergency infrastructure of the southern East United States were entirely shattered. The Huntsville Clear plant lost offset power, plunging 500,000 people into multi-day blackouts. Search and rescue operations lasted for weeks across the flattened landscape. April 28, 2011, the historical super outbreak finally came to an end. At the primary cold front of them moved towards the Atlantic coast, the severe level shifted east, dropping final 30 tornadoes of the outbreak before the entire system moved out to the ocean. Before the sun even rose on April 28, the catastrophic supercells of the night were still spinning through parts of the east. Several lingering strong tornadoes struck after midnight, including destructive EF3s that tore 20-mile paths along Mariah, Spalding, and Henry counties in Georgia. Several squall lines ripped across states, dropping quick tornadoes and knocking out power for the storm system pushed further northeast. It lost its explosive moisture of the Gulf of Mexico, resulting in mostly weaker, shorter-lived tornadoes. Virginia and Maryland, the primary target for this afternoon, saw a series of EF1s and EF0s touch down and cause shattered damage to homes, taking power grids and dumping heavy rainfall. After the outbreak winds down, by the evening of April 28, the final tornado associated with the system dissolved, and a massive low-pressure cyclone pushed off the east coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Attention immediately shifted away from the sky and entirely into what will become of a multi-week search, rescue, and recovery effort. The physical recovery from the 2011 super outbreak took between 3 and 5 years for most communities to rebuild their basic infrastructure while completing economic and structural restoration. The hardest hit towns took nearly decades. In completely level towns like Smithville, Mississippi, Hackleburg, and Alabama, the population dynamic permanently shifted, and it took roughly until 2021 for the physical scars of the landscape to local economies to fully stabilize.